Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. On this episode of the Treasury Update Podcast, host Craig Jeffery speaks with Lee-Ann Perkins on the importance of Treasury mentors and soft skills. They share meaningful insights on the necessary elements of mentoring, finding a trusted advisor, becoming a lifelong learner, and paying it forward. Listen in to learn how to position yourself and others for career success and personal growth.
Lee-Ann, I'm really interested in talking about Treasury mentors and soft skills, and so I want to welcome you to the Treasury Update Podcast again.
Thank you, Craig. It's always nice to talk to you. And, this is a topic that's so near and dear to my heart and one that I really enjoy talking about. So thanks for making the time today to discuss the topic of mentoring. I hope it inspires others to accept the assignment of being a mentor and also for asking someone to be your mentor as well.
Yeah, so this certainly falls into the softer skills of management and career development. This idea of coaching and mentoring other Treasury professionals, or being coached and being mentored, is an interesting topic. But maybe we could start with the background on that. What's the need for mentoring? Why do you need a mentor? And does everyone need a mentor?
I think they do. And I think it's good to sort of start off with what really is a mentor and the difference between a mentor and a coach. So a mentor is a relationship that more often than not develops organically through informal networks you have with connections in your industry, so the Treasury industry. And it's a professional relationship that usually bridges the gap into the personal relationship as well. So the idea behind mentoring is really to help build up the mentee's character and to invest in their overall professional success. And you want to be concerned about the mentee's goals, and as a mentor, you need to be a trusted advisor as well. The important difference between mentoring and coaching is a mentor doesn't do it for money. This is a volunteer assignment that you do because you're driven by the satisfaction of helping another pay it forward from really any similar experiences you've had in your careers. And more often than not, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And with coaching, that's more of a professional assignment where you're called in, usually by companies, to fix a particular problem and to work on identifying some sort of primary issue. So an example would be, maximizing an employee's potential, or determining why there's underperformance in a team. And then I think to go back to your other question is, why do you need a mentor? Mentoring has been around for a long time. It's been useful and helpful to many people, but I think it's become much more pronounced and more discussed in the business world due to COVID. And the desire for mentoring has increased. At least that's what I've seen in my network. So, a lot of younger employees, or really anyone in a spot in their career, is looking for guidance. And the purpose of the mentor is to help you excel in your career, as we spoke about. But, then came COVID, and this sudden void and move of employees outside of the office to a remote environment. We saw the luxury of informal learning disappear, and really suddenly too. So employees were losing out on this perk. And we didn't all really know how to manage this remote environment when it all started. A lot of people felt lonely, they felt isolated in their work, and they also, I think, felt left behind in their careers and their growth. So over time, COVID's been around for, a year and a half. We've come to discover ways to manage this new normal. And I think a large part of that is thriving and leaning on and learning from trusted and experienced employees. And this was just another way to share experiences between workers. And I think mentors also benefited in this way because they got to feel valued from their experiences, and they were also happy to help others through tough times and at the same time learn from them. So I think it's important to have a mentor to help you navigate professional relationships and to also grow you up in your career.
She said a couple of those things, the difference between a mentor and a coach, and I think I use both of those terms almost interchangeably. You provided a break between them. The mentor, the relationships develop organically and perhaps intentionally too. Coaching is, it sounded like that's intentional, sometimes driven by the organization doing that. Is that right? And is there also a difference between coaching is usually for a short period of time or to address a particular issue, whereas mentorship is a more comprehensive view of development in a career perspective? Are those differences as well?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. In the sense of coaching, it is usually for a shorter period of time, and you're looking to just fix a particular problem that comes up. And it's usually something either the company goes out to get or you personally go out to get because you're lacking a skill or you need some information. And with mentoring, it's like you mentioned, that organically growing relationship over time. And you usually have come to trust this person already before you ask them to be your mentor. So it's a kind of a watch and see relationship over time. But I think they're both very important, and it just depends where in your career you are or what types of skills you're developing. And over my career, I've engaged both a coach that I've paid for and also a mentor that I've had for years. And I think they're both equally as useful, just different skills and different experiences at the time.
On the mentor side, where there's this, maybe it develops organically, maybe it's more intentionally sought by one or both parties. Does that typically come from within the organization, within the profession, or are there any elements there of mentoring that looks different?
It's best if your mentor is not your boss or someone that you're closely connected to at work. Because in a mentor relationship, you're usually dealing with a lot of honest and difficult conversations, and it sometimes can pertain to managing up, which would be your boss, or managing your team members. So if that relationship can be objective and outside of your actual company that you're in, it's a little easier to be open and honest about those challenges, and you can work through them in a different way. And with the coach, it's, a lot of times C-suites or executives hire professional coaches so that they can work on their development and developing their teams underneath them. So their company is involved, and it's, more of a professional relationship in that manner. So I think from my point of view, that's how I've seen it develop. And in the mentoring, so in the Treasury specific field, we have a lot of associations and organizations that provide opportunities for mentorship. And you can either get them through sort of being matched up with a mentor, or you can, like I did, watch people over time, realize that my values were the same as their values, and I wanted to learn the skills that they had. So I would approach them over time. So it was more of a relationship over time. I've also engaged a mentor who I didn't know personally before having this relationship with them. And that was because I wanted to get a particular skill set from someone who had the same education as I do. And I thought that would be very beneficial for the time I was going through. And of course we met up and we sort of made sure we gelled and we had the same objectives in mind. So I think there's many ways to mentoring, but it's just what works with you and with the mentor at the time you need it.
Appreciate those comments, and I'm just thinking as we transition to what are the necessary elements of mentoring. You started touching on them, but the one question I had is, if you're talking about someone who doesn't see you as much, let's say at work they're removed in other areas. How do you balance between, like you said, you talked about being honest, but it's easy to present a different front or facade to someone who doesn't see your weak spots or strengths or underdeveloped areas, or they know more about how you present yourself and what you share rather than seeing it. So I guess part of that's, how do we, besides just being honest about it, how do you make sure you're not covering up your blind spots because you're only sharing it the way you have a perspective on it?
And that is a great question, because from my experience with a mentor who didn't personally know me before we started our relationship, the first few conversations over Zoom. Obviously we had our cameras on, so there was interaction. First few were pretty guarded. I seemed like an amazing person with no problems. But then as you start to actually let them know your intentions of being mentored, what you're trying to gain from it, a experienced and a really good mentor will be able to bring out that objective viewpoint where they see why you're facing these particular problems or what skill sets you need to develop because of how they see you objectively. And I think there's two sides to it. When you know someone well, sometimes you are blinded by them because you don't think, oh, why would they have any other issues? This is my friend. I know them. They're perfectly fine. And when it's a complete stranger, they see you differently and they're looking for areas to try and help you. So I think, when we talked about earlier the importance of a mentor, it's also important to seek out somebody who has experience in this area, who knows how to get the most out of you and to draw it out of you. Because it does take time. Unless you're the person who just immediately spills your guts and says, these are all my issues, it's going to take time to draw it out of you. And I think for the mentee, they got to go into that relationship with the right intentions. If they genuinely want to grow and they genuinely know they need help in skills development, then I think they'll be honest with, why they're facing the problems they are and what other people are perhaps telling them that's leading them to trying to get this relationship going.
Why do you need a mentor, or why do you want to be a mentor? What's the value in it? Tell me if this is part of it. One, and expand or adjust what I'm saying if it's not right. To be mentored, you're looking for someone who can coach you, say hard things that is outside, let's say, the chain of command. So they can be brutal, but it might not hurt as much because you're not being evaluated for the position. So it's another set of ways to improve individually. And why would you want to be a mentor? Because that takes time. In addition to just saying, I want to help the profession, help people, that some of the altruistic aspects, the other side of the coin of the altruism might be if you're helping to guide someone, you're able to, maybe be blunt, figure out ways to help people that should make you a better leader, coworker, finding ways and seeing how you can help others. So there's this other way of I can be a better manager, leader, if I'm coaching others, because I'll learn some things that it's too hard to learn, or some of it's harder to learn when it's with direct reports or peers. Is that part of it too, or?
That is, because it's like you said, there's the altruistic side where you do it because you want to help your profession. But on the other side, people go into mentoring a lot of the times to gain skills themselves. So, you gain great leadership experiences, and maybe you don't get those experiences necessarily at work. Maybe you're only a informal leader at work. So this is a way to help you grow your own leadership skills. And I think one of the most important things is it also teaches you the valuable skill and art of delivering feedback, because that's not always easy. That's not always something you're taught at work, other than a quick HR course on, we're doing our goals this year. Make sure when you tell people, how they've performed over the years, you use these words, etc. So this is a great way to give feedback, to also ask questions and to become a good listener, because that's one of the skills I think many of us, I can speak for myself, don't listen as well as we should. So this is one way outside of your job to train yourself also to become a good listener, because when you're listening to other people and you're really trying to help them, you're asking good questions and you're engaged in the conversation as well. And on the other side of it too is you also get to gain new networks. So oftentimes the mentor comes from a different background, was on a different level, or maybe even a different age where they don't necessarily have the same network. So I found in my experience, it has been so great to learn from others in, maybe even a different age bracket who have a different set of networks and a different set of experiences, and I can learn from them and what they bring to the table as well. So it's not just the fact that you're giving back, but you're also getting something for yourself as well.
Yeah, the gaining new networks is pretty interesting. As we talk about what are the necessary elements of mentoring, you've already covered the why do you need a mentor? There's a tremendous amount of value there, from giving back to learning and giving and getting feedback. But a couple of questions. So how do you get one? How do you get a mentor? Or how do you become a mentor? And the time and commitment. What does this look like? What's the investment?
So how do you get a mentor? A good starting point, I think, is to always identify, what do you want out of the relationship and what are you trying to grow yourself? So when you understand why you're getting into it, then you can start to identify someone in your network who you think has those skills and who can help guide you with really what you're trying to achieve. So one way to do it is to, approach the network you're in. So in our treasury field, we have a big networks. We interact with a lot of people, both at our jobs and externally as well. So observe people, find people who you agree with, who you want to emulate, and then once you've built a relationship, you can ask them for help. And then you can also use different resources that are available. So my mentor who I currently have, I was matched with through a professional association at Treasury in the UK. And, we sort of had to put our preferences in what we were trying to get out of it into this program. And then it gave me a listing of people I could contact. So that's one way to do it. And then I also think you could ask your trusted advisors around you. So even if that is your boss or someone at work, someone in your family, ask about who do you think would help me best be able to work through these issues or gain these skills. And I think more often than not, at least in my experiences, and maybe it's because I only know nice people, but people are so willing to help, and they're so willing to give up their experiences to help you succeed in your career. And then, as you mentioned about the time commitment, this is something that has to be established up front when you ask someone to join this relationship with you, because it is genuinely a lot of work. If you're going to do it properly and you're going to really try to get the most out of it, you should establish the time frame up front. How often can you meet? What method are you going to meet over? Are you going to meet up for coffee? Are you going to do it over Zoom? It has to be relational, so it's not good over email, but you really have to establish this up front. And then how realistic is the timetable? If you're asking someone who's a CEO of a Fortune 10 company, they probably don't have the time to help you. But just be honest up front with, this is what you need, this is the time commitment, and then discuss that with the person you're asking to become your mentor. And then, this is mutually beneficial. So you both can benefit from it, but what you put in is what you're going to get out. So if you treat it like it's just a temporary assignment, then you're probably not going to get the most out of it. But if you treat it as something that's really something you want to build on and grow over years, then you need to establish that time commitment. And I remember someone in my network had asked a person who had just given birth to twins, and she had a baby at home, to be their mentor. And it just went to show that you have to be realistic and you have to understand the other person's point of view as well. Someone with 3 babies at home doesn't have necessarily the time to commit. So, you don't want to be disappointed either. So establish that up front, and then you can build on the relationship over time. But just know it does take a lot of time and commitment.
Well, let me be a little more precise in the question there. That it takes a lot, but is this something where what's the range of how frequently you meet and how long is it for? Is it every other week, monthly, quarterly? What would be some of the ranges that someone who's new to mentoring would be looking at? Yeah,
good question. I also think it depends on what you personally can commit to, but for me, it works once a month, where we have a set timetable of when we're going to meet. We're in different countries, so it's easier to say 7 a.m. for me works perfectly on a Thursday once a month. So when it's set and scheduled in your calendar, then you tend not to miss those meetings because they're already planned. And it also gives both me and my mentor time to prepare our questions, for me mostly to do the homework that's been assigned, and for me to work on some of those skill developments or areas that we've discussed in our previous meetings. So I would say that you probably don't want to do it less than once a month. And especially upfront as you're building that relationship, as you working through things, and you should have some goals set up of what you're trying to accomplish, and realistically, how long are these going to take you? So I would say, to a new mentor, just not less than once a month. And we meet for an hour at a time.
Yeah, that seems quite manageable in most environments, right? You're looking at 12 hours a year plus transport time if you're physically meeting for some type of caffeinated drink.
Yes,
but
always.
When you look for a mentor, this is a soft skill question, and this is something that I'm not sitting on the couch asking you to counsel me on this, but some of this, one of the things I've seen is, like if you're giving feedback to staff, there's some people that the slightest non-supportive or less than supportive or encouragement to one person may be viewed as very harsh, and they want to correct their behavior and adjust very radically. And others, an extremely direct approach is necessary to get their attention, and they almost don't get it unless you're saying, you will be terminated if you don't do this. And so there's very different recipients there. And I think on this, and I'm thinking this on the mentor side, do you also look at, who is similar to me in style or approach or whatever, and who's different? And is that, someone who may be more of a global thinker versus a linear process-oriented person, someone who's more extroverted or more introverted? And is that different than I am? And you can go on through some of the processes. So is it better to have someone who's different so you can see other sides, or someone that's the same who might be able to help you adapt from a position of understanding?
It's a bit of both. I've had many different mentors over my career, male and female, much older than me and much younger than me. And I think if I look at all of them, they all had completely different personalities to me. And when I first went out to get my mentors, I probably didn't think, this is what I'm going out to do. I'm going to get someone who's different to me. I went out to look for someone who could help me with my weaknesses. And more often than not, because I'm more introverted, I'm looking to people who are, at least the way they display themselves to me, they're very confident. They don't have any trouble speaking up. They are able to speak off the cuff. They just do things that come naturally to them that don't to me. And I think that's why I gravitate towards, very extroverted people, because I want to build myself up on the confidence level, and I want to be like them in those type of situations. And if I were to only meet with people who were exactly like me, I don't think I would gain much traction, because there wouldn't really be a blind spot that they notice in me because we were the same type of person. And my coach was like that too, complete opposite personality to me. So it may not have been a choice at the time to do that, but I think over time it's led me to the same type of people. As long as they have the same values as I do, then I think the personality is, I'm driving that way because I want to learn something and gain experience in areas that they have from me. And it's probably different for everybody, and how they react, how they take feedback, and how they learn as well. And I think you just have to figure that out for yourself. And I think also in the mentor relationship, if over time you discover that, this is not working for you, and your personalities aren't the same, or you're not getting what you need out of it, then it's, also time to maybe move on and choose somebody else.
So now you're in a mentor, you have a mentor relationship, you're mentoring or you're being mentored. How do you evaluate the relationship from either side? And then I want to talk about the learning aspect of that too, because I think that's part of the evaluation. But how do you evaluate, let's say, a mentor?
So for me, the first thing I always did is to make sure we have the same value set. Is it somebody that's unwavering on their ethics? Is it someone who's displays good judgment, who's very wise, and who just has a tenacious attitude? And so those are all the things that draw me to a person who I need help, want to take advice and help from. And then the first thing, I did, and I did this maybe a year ago, and I think you know me by now, I often think left of center and come at problems a little differently to most people, but I was thinking a while back about SWOT analysis. I was doing my dissertation, and I was having to do a SWOT analysis on a company, trying to define the competitive advantage of that company. And I thought to myself, as professionals, this is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to define our own competitive advantage, whether it's in a job interview, in our current positions, when you're writing your resume, or even, you're doing your annual review. So I started doing a SWOT analysis on myself. And then when I had done that and I identified all my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, I then looked at my mentors and people that I look up to in my life, and I sort of evaluated, how do my attributes parallel to what I see in them? Because I want to leverage their great attributes that they have to try and improve my own. So for an example, on the strength side, I looked at my mentor and I thought, do we have similar strengths? And those strengths that were similar and were matched up, those affirmed the strengths I had. So that made me really happy. And then I looked at the areas, the weaknesses, my weaknesses, and these are areas for change. So when I look at my mentor and I see she does not display those same weaknesses, then I know these are areas and habits that I either need to stop or to reduce, to help reduce my own weaknesses. So that it kind of highlighted to me, a little bit more of the areas I needed to work on. And then on the opportunity side, I looked at this as areas for guidance and development. So does my mentor, has she followed an education track I've wanted to get into? Has she taken some speaking courses or volunteered as a mentor or pursued different avenues to me? And the things that I identified, those are the ones that I want to use those opportunities to help me in my own career. And then the threats, I think, was the one that was the most important and highlighted to me my blind spots. And this was, an area of self-reflection. This one took a long time to get through, but it's the idea of identifying, those areas of self-sabotage. And for me, it's where I don't have a lot of confidence, where I sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome. And, that can derail even the most experienced person. But my mentor sees me from a different perspective, and she helps grow my confidence and build my skills so I can make these threats less evident and eliminate them over time. So that's what I did. And I to sum it up, mentors are there to find ways to stimulate our personal and professional growth. And while I was doing the SWOT analysis on myself, I found this quote from a famous movie director, and I think this just says it all. So the quote is, "The delicate balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves." So by doing the SWOT analysis, you're not trying to be a copy-paste of your mentor. This is just a great way to take all the learnings of someone you admire and work them into developing and growing yourself.
There's a lot of good comments in there, and the self-SWOT analysis is quite interesting. Your phrase self-sabotage, I think, is a good one. Where are you tripping yourself up, and does this allow you to see it, whether from the mentor or through this self-SWOT analysis? You've already shared a few of the things that you've learned. So what have you learned through being mentored and being a mentor? You talked about some blind spots, et cetera. Are there any examples that you want to share of this is what mentoring or being mentored did for me?
So I have two. So most recently, one of the best learning lessons I had with my mentor was evaluating career decisions and job offers. I've just recently changed positions, and I had a couple of job offers come my way, and it was so interesting and so helpful to discuss these with my mentor, because she's been in my shoes before. She asked questions that I hadn't even thought of when considering these job offers. She also helped me, review my resume and polish up some areas. She helped me review my LinkedIn profile and kind of polish some areas of that too. So these were all an area that I really hadn't thought of that mentors could help you with until we actually went through this together. So it was almost like, really great career advice on a different level than I had expected. So it was very helpful, and she ultimately, helped me make a really great decision in my career. And then the other one was, I mentioned earlier about imposter syndrome and confidence. And, a while back, someone once said to me that when you're suffering from being unconfident and you're suffering from maybe comparing yourself to others, you really got to stop and you got to remember why you particularly were hired. You were hired for your own attributes that you bring, your skill set, and your personality too, and what you bring to the table. So you don't need to be your boss. You don't need to be somebody else who's on the team. You just need to be yourself. You need to work hard. You need to work on those areas of development, sure. And use this time to learn something from everyone. Don't compare yourself to other people, but build up your own confidence and bring to your company what they're paying you for. And I thought this was just such a great learning lesson for me, because, I just feel like I should be that person that refreshes others at work. I shouldn't be a person who's not confident enough to do my job. So it was a great lesson, and I've never forgotten that from her. And sometimes when I struggle, I stop to remember that I have a sticky note written on my computer of those sayings, and it just helps me in times where I just need a little boost.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those. You talked earlier about, I don't know if you used the term honest conversations or getting the kind of feedback, whether it's viewed as a kick in the backside or not. But how do you listen or take the feedback, or understand what's wise counsel and what may be something that you're not going to follow, but primarily, how do you take the wise counsel and advice that you get from a mentor, and then maybe conversely, how do you give that?
Yeah, I think it's something that you develop over time. It's not easy always to take feedback. We often don't see our blind spots, but I think you've got to come to this relationship with the fact that you are recognizing the good intentions of the person giving the feedback. So a good mentor's one who takes the time to lift you up, to bounce you back after you were knocked down, and to help you navigate. So when they give you constructive criticism or any feedback, you got to take it for the good intentions that they're offering it with. It's also important, and this can be at work too, when you get feedback from people, is if you maybe don't necessarily agree with it or you need time to think about it, you should also talk to more than one person about it, so you can triangulate the information and see if maybe it is actually true, and maybe you do have these blind spots. So it's important to also evaluate the information you're given. Don't just take everything blindly and accept it, but if it's something you really feel you need to discuss further, talk to some more people about it and just try to really get a good impression of areas you maybe need to work on if it's constructive feedback. And then I think also, when you trust someone who you're working with and you've gained their respect, then it might be a good idea to take their wise counsel, and they have your best intentions at heart. Giving feedback too in itself can be difficult, but what I've learned over the 17 years of working is that if you don't give feedback quickly and you're not honest about it, it's going to be much more difficult. So you might as well just take the bull by the horns and do it when it happens. And being honest about whatever the problem is or whatever needs to change is really the best way to deal with feedback.
Just as to close, what are your final thoughts or any closing remarks on this topic of mentoring?
I just think it's really important to go for this mentoring and mentee relationship. I think it's provided so much value to me and to many people in the Treasury profession. And, I just recently had the most exciting experience with mentoring when I had met somebody recently who's an engineer by trade and by education and by experience. And he got into the finance area and decided that treasury was just what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. And so we got connected and we started talking about what treasury is, how do you become successful in treasury and what sort of skills and attributes you need to get into treasury. So I invited him into my networks and we communicated and we built this relationship. And just recently, at the end of last year, he called me and said he got a job in treasury. And it was the most fulfilling and exciting day. I honestly felt like I'd won the job. I was so happy for him that someone who had developed outside of his other formal education this passion for treasury, and he just wanted to get into it. And he used all his time and energy to research the profession, research the networks, took my advice, and he got this job that he now just loves. And it can be so rewarding. It was just a wonderful experience. So I think, some advice for mentors: if you can live sacrificially with your time, your energy, and your wisdom, and you can help others as they strive forward in their careers, it is just such a wonderful feeling. I really hope that everyone finds a mentor in life and just also remembers that nothing has to be done alone. Be the link in the chain of people you admire and trust.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update Podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.